folks, welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me in the wild landscape of Scotland. And just check out, we're on this wild moorland here in Perth and Kinross, and I just noticed what looks like the rooftop of an abandoned house in here. So I was just going to take a walk along and see what's left of an ancient time here out in this wild land. Look at this interesting detail. These are snow poles at the side of the road, and those are put in obviously so when it's a pure whiteout, mad snowy conditions, you can see where the road actually is located. Wow, this is so cool out here, folks. It's a narrow little single road and I've been driving it for miles, and when I've noticed these little houses I just thought it's so cool to stop at them, see what's left from an ancient time in Scottish history here. This one looks like it might be in a sorry state, but sometimes the wee layers of history or details of history that you can uncover is so interesting to see. There we go, folks. I've infiltrated the perimeter here. Obviously to the landowners and farm owners and stuff, I come with the greatest respect. Whenever there's sheep and stuff in the fields, I always approach with caution and I try not to flag them, because at this time of year the sheep's got lambs and sometimes they're actually lambing, so if they get stressed out they can lose the lamb. So it's important just to like navigate around, document the history without even going near any of these animals. What a crazy piece of land this is. Sometimes on these adventures I can't believe like the surrounding landscape where these little houses and stuff are located. You can imagine like how long they've been abandoned out on these hills, and think of the person that lived there looking out over this view, maybe at one time covered with a lot more trees, because I can see at the top of the hill there's still a mad like massive forest up there, and there's forest just all the way around those surrounding hills, but from here you can just see so far, miles, folks. It's just such a special landscape to explore. There is a bit of a breeze up here today and I apologise for that in the audio. Hopefully once we get up to this kind of bit here it'll be better. I'm going to keep my voice down though, because I can see what looks like a roof of another building, so we'll see what's here. Sometimes it's a complete fail. This could actually be somebody's little house from the road. It might just be the abandoned part of it I can see. Here we go, folks. Once again we've found some ancient history here, abandoned and hidden in the wild landscape of Scotland here, and it's crazy how stuff like this can often tell a forgotten bit of history. And there can be interesting little details around places like this from the people that built these houses, and sometimes the people who first ever managed and farmed this land here. And it would have been the same people that built all these ancient wall lines here. And then as times progressed, the whole croft and farm was upgraded and renovated. And then as you can see, one day it just got abandoned and left. The family that lived here must have either died out or just like left the place and moved away. Whereas like sometimes places like this were like burnt down. Each house I go to is in like a different state, or it's got a different story of history. Sometimes that's the kind of things that I love finding. Check that out, folks. I love to see that. The old window frames are still in there with the old putty in them. It looks like the windows have actually been painted a red colour. It's hard to even see it nowadays because obviously so many years has passed. It looks like this place has been abandoned since the 1800s, I would say at least. Or maybe even I would say 1900s, early 1900s, folks. Look, there's been another roof out this side, which shows there's been another building. Maybe a wooden construction, which is just fully gone now. This weather today is just so warm and so sunny. It's just incredible for going out on adventures. I can hear these little swallows flying around. Wow, it's such a cool location. Look at the old porch. You can see how other parts may have been built with wood at a certain time with a tin roof. Sometimes when houses got abandoned, Other items got like reused at different places. It looks like the farmer still currently uses that shed there for his sheep or his shepherd operations, because it's got a newer roof on it for sure. Yeah, these swallows here must be nesting maybe in these buildings. But swallows are so friendly, and when they're flying about they often come right in close, and then they could just sit down often right near you. They're a crazy type of bird. Anyway, let's have a look in here and see what we can see, folks. Yeah, this will be where the swallows are nesting. So we'll get out of here pretty quick. Look at the old stone slabs there. Oh, think of the boots that may have walked over that floor after a hard day's work on the farm. Oh look, there's an old... Oh, this is crazy. I don't know, it's obviously not original graffiti, I don't believe, but look what's written here. 1745. It was likely to have been somebody a bit in newer times, maybe. Skull and crossbones and things. And look at that there, there's actually like a soldier or whatever been drawn there. That's so cool to see that though. That's like some ancient graffiti right there. And look, the number 3's been stamped into the wood there as well. Yeah, I wonder what that's been. It's almost like some type of cult symbol. That's like a pair of scissors, I would say, or maybe 2 swords. 1745 with the cross swords. And then that's got the Roman numeral for number 1 with the skull and crossbones. And I'm sure that there says nuts, but it's got like another skull. And then that there's a soldier. It was maybe even a youngster or something when this place was still complete with like a roof. Maybe somebody was just in here playing around, doodling. Because sometimes if you grow up in the countryside, this is the kind of places that you would be playing or hanging out. But that could just be so many years ago that now, obviously you can see it now all these years later. It's just crazy. It's like a tornado's just made its way through here. But you can see also the interesting detail, how it's had that wooden inlay in the walls in those rooms. And that's what I've mentioned on previous videos, they had that. But also in here I'm seeing evidence of like lath and plaster on these other walls. But a cool detail behind that is the white render, which we saw last week at the abandoned farm. And originally when this house was built, way back in the day, that would have been the original finish on the inside of the wall, before the days of the lath and plaster even. Because look, you can see how there's been a cupboard here in the original design, whereas when they've put in the lath and plaster around here, they've actually blocked it up. You can see the woodwork there which they've used to do so. Oh, it's so interesting to see that. And imagine the person coming in here, they maybe had the bottle of whiskey and they were going to have a wee drink of it, sitting at the fireside after eating a big bowl of stovies. And then up the stair there must have been another little room, maybe a bedroom or a couple of bedrooms, because quite often there would be like a kitchen and like a sitting room. But back in those days most families would have just sat in the kitchen end of the house. They would have one room which was particularly warm. And look, here's a detail, an interesting detail. At the abandoned farm last week we found one of these sticking out of the ground. And look at it. I was since told it's the old bed frames that you used to get on the old beds. And look, here's more of them here. Check that out, folks. Those metal ends were designed to slot in. And that was the proper bed frames of the olden days. And seemingly they had springs on them, and when you moved about on the bed it was proper like creaky and noisy. But that's interesting to see that as well. So that was maybe a bed which was up the stair, and when the roof fell in, clatter, the bed and stuff all landed down here. Wow, it's so interesting to think of this sort of stuff and theorise the history like this. Look at that for a view. Imagine in your sitting room looking out the window, and from here I can probably see like 50 mile or more to massive hills in the distance, beyond all these hills in front of me. It's like a postcard scene out here, and it's so special being able to come and video places like this and share them with people all over the world. This is the sort of corners of Scotland that you wouldn't even see probably on like the tourist maps, folks. It's a spontaneous adventure at an old roadside location, which is an abandoned farm croft, and probably the whole house would have had this originally, which was the stone slabs. And there's the remains of the old door there. Yeah, I think what there's been here is like 3 rooms, and it looks like the central room's been like a larder, like we saw in that house last week. The little window at the back, it most likely had like a mesh over it or whatever. Wow, what a special adventure it's been. Look, this window's been painted green here originally. You can still see the remains of the green paint on the frame. Like the old mechanisms. Can any storm or any day of the week, that could just fall down and be destroyed. Videos like this just save the history, and you can see how it looked at a certain time in its history. Putting up with all sorts of like snow and wind and wild weather on the hill. It's so special to come to a place like this on a day like this when it's really sunny and warm. So these lands here are ancient, folks, and I can see there's actual remains of what would have been other little settlements and crofts all over here on different hills. And each one of these different crofts has got its own little like story to tell of the history and the agriculture in this time. Just another one explored and another one ticked off the list, folks. I just literally noticed it when I was going up the road, and I thought I have to come and see it, because houses like this could just disappear overnight if somebody wanted to tear it down or destroy it. Look, this rock here must have high iron content, because you can see the rust like running out of it. And that often is the case with some of the stones that's up here, like wild on the hill. Some of these mountains around this landscape is just sheer cliffs, solid stone. Often on these mountains, if you scraped a bit of the earth away so deep, you would realise it was just solid rock you were standing on. Anyway, folks, I'm going to head on out. That's obviously been one of the little sheds related to this croft, but because it still looks in decent condition, I think the farmer must still use that. I'm now going to go like poking about in his private areas. But it's so special to see the wee house and see the things that we've seen within it. And it looks like it has been cared for all the way up maybe in like the 1900s, but it's certainly not had electricity, or most likely it didn't even have running water. And at the end of the day, that's why a lot of these places were abandoned. The amount it would cost to get all those amenities like fed up to a site like this would just be too much, and it wouldn't make sense. But it's just so cool, like I can't even believe often when I see a thing like that. It's just the colours of the rock and the stone. I need to get a different angle, I think, for a photograph. So check that out, folks, for an angle of abandoned history right here. And once again, it's been a fun wee adventure to get here. I've had to negotiate around these like sheep and stuff like that. Yeah, the landscape's crazy. There's loads of beasties I can see roaming about today, but I've still not seen any ticks. I do have the trousers tucked into the socks just as a precaution. Whoa! Oh, there's a wee beastie, and I thought it was a tick, but it's not. It was a spider. It was a tiny little spider. I thought for a second for sure it was a tick. It was just so little. But yeah, it's a real threat out in this environment with those ticks and stuff like that. But I still love the adventure too much to ever stop. And seeing things like that and finding this sort of stuff, navigating through this wilderness, it's so much fun. Probably once the farmer had built all these walls and built this farm kind of area, he was probably the first one to clear this land, and he would have been proud of his achievements. And I think this has been a pretty big field at this side that he's cleared. Maybe one of the main fields on a farm. And that would have been a fair size of a croft back in the day. Because I think there's remains of more ancient crofts within this land, and they're often just like a pile of rubble, a pile of stones or an outline. and they're the sort of crofts that were even older, and then often the land was taken on from crofters like this. And then the same thing even happened to these crofters, where their land was taken by more farmers. Like, they were bought over and bought out, and all the farmers really wanted was the land rather than the little houses within it. And that's the reason you get these wee cottages and houses just sitting in the landscape waiting to be explored like that. It's so much fun when I find one. I'm always blown away by the different little stories of the history that I find. Sometimes there's some cool little artefacts as well hidden within these places, but that was a cool one today, just also because of the landscape that it's in. It's just so vast, folks, and mega. Right, folks, I've made it back to this incredible little main road that just weaves its way through this magical land. And what a cool wee adventure I've had. I've really enjoyed seeing like what we've seen in this adventure, and that little house just sitting up there, you can imagine it when it was in its prime and in its heyday, but then nowadays it just sits derelict and empty way out here in this remote piece of land. It's like hardly travelled, or most likely people are just commuting past a road like this, hardly looking at the history and hardly imagining even what's been there. Right, folks, that's me just about back at my car, so I'm going to end this one here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with the next adventure, wherever I end up going.
you.